They believed they had found the definitive answer to war. Not a tactic, not a weapon, but a decision. A choice as solid as the concrete that sustained it. On the day it was announced, the enemy fell silent. Foreign generals studied maps without speaking. Military analysts frowned. For the first time in decades, it seemed that France had discovered a way to make invasion impossible. But history rarely punishes with noise. Sometimes, it punishes with time. And this is the story of a choice that first shocked the enemy, then reassured an entire nation, and finally failed in silence. Without spectacular ruin, without visible collapse, simply falling behind as the world moved on. The First World War officially ended in 1918. But for France, it never truly ended. The conflict remained alive in the devastated fields of the north, in destroyed factories, in the names carved into stone monuments scattered across every village. More than 1 million French soldiers had died. Millions more carried physical and psychological wounds. The collective memory of the country was shaped by the constant thunder of artillery and the endless sight of trenches. The idea that a new war could repeat that scenario was unbearable. Within this national trauma, one conviction became dominant. France could never again allow the enemy to cross its eastern border with ease. The next war would have to be fought at the edges of the territory, not within its heart. Defense would need to be so powerful that the very thought of a direct attack would be discarded before it was even considered. It was in this context that the idea emerged of a permanent fortification along the border with Germany. Not a symbolic line, but a physical structure of colossal scale. A defensive system that would combine modern engineering, firepower, and strategic depth. Something that did not depend on improvisation or late mobilization. Something that would be ready every day, every hour, in peace or in war. The main defender of this vision was a veteran of the First World War, wounded in combat. He understood the human cost of war better than most politicians. For him, fortification was not merely a military option, but a moral duty. If the state possessed the means to protect its citizens, then there was no justification for failing to do so. The project began to take shape in the late 1920s. The Maginot Line would not be a simple visible wall. On the contrary, much of its structure would be hidden underground. Deep subterranean fortresses, connected by tunnels, equipped with their own electrical systems, ventilation against chemical attacks, internal hospitals, dormitories, ammunition depots, and narrow railways for supply transport. Heavy artillery would be protected by retractable steel turrets, capable of emerging to fire and disappearing again within seconds. It was a monumental undertaking, both in scale and in cost. Thousands of workers took part in its construction. Military engineers applied the most recent lessons of defensive science. Every detail was calculated to withstand the heaviest bombardment imaginable. The central idea was simple and powerful. If the enemy attacked head-on, it would be stopped, bled, and eventually forced to retreat. When the first sections were completed, the psychological effect was immediate. In Ile-de-France, the Maginot Line became a symbol of security. Newspapers described it as impregnable. Politicians presented it as the guarantee that the horrors of 1914 would never be repeated. The population, exhausted by war, wanted to believe. On the other side of the border, the initial reaction was one of surprise. German military observers quickly recognized that a frontal assault against such a line would be extremely costly. The specter of trench warfare still haunted Europe, and no one wished to relive that bloody stalemate. For a time, the Maginot Line fulfilled exactly the role for which it had been designed. It de terre. But while France felt protected, something began to change almost imperceptibly. War itself was evolving. The experiences of the late First World War, combined with technological advances, were giving rise to a new military doctrine. Mobility, speed, and coordination became more valuable than fixed positions. Faster armored units, close air support, and efficient communications created possibilities that had not existed in 1918. The Maginot Line, by definition, could not move. Its power was concentrated in specific points of the terrain. It had been designed to face an enemy that would attack in a predictable manner, concentrating forces against the fortified border. This assumption seemed logical. After all, that was how the previous war had been fought. But the logic of the last war does not always apply to the next. One of the most critical elements of the French project was the decision not to extend the Maginot Line fully to the border with Belgium. This choice was both political and strategic. France wished to maintain good relations with the Belgians and believed that, in the event of conflict, fighting would occur on Belgian territory, as it had in 1914. In addition, there was the assumption that certain regions, such as the dense forests of the Ardennes, would be naturally impassable to large mechanized forces. That assumption would prove fatal. As the 1930s progressed, French confidence in the Maginot Line grew stronger. It was not merely a fortification, but the central axis of the nation's entire defensive strategy. Financial resources, political attention, and military planning gravitated toward it. At the same time, investment in mobile forces, offensive training, and strategic flexibility received less priority. The Maginot Line began to shape mentalities. Young officers were trained with the idea that fixed defense was the pillar of national security. The possibility of a fast, fluid, highly mobile war was underestimated. The psychological comfort provided by concrete and steel created a sense of control in an increasingly unstable world. When the Second World War broke out, the Maginot Line was ready. Its garrisons were supplied. Its systems functioned. Its guns were calibrated. And indeed, when the conflict began, it was not breached. No frontal assault broke through it. In purely technical terms, it did what it was designed to do. But the war did not come as expected. German forces avoided direct confrontation. Instead, they advanced through routes considered secondary, crossing less protected territories and exploiting precisely the conceptual gaps in French strategy. The attack through the Ardennes, considered unlikely, proved decisive. The speed of the advance, combined with the coordinated use of armored units and air power, quickly disorganized the Allied defense. Meanwhile, the powerful fortresses of the Maginot Line remained intact, filled with soldiers prepared for a battle that never arrived. In Manicasse's garrisons only understood the gravity of the situation when they were already isolated, surrounded, or simply ignored by the main flow of the war. There was no single dramatic moment of collapse. There was no symbolic scene of flags being torn down or walls crumbling. There was only the gradual realization that the most feared line in Europe had become irrelevant. The war had passed around it, not through it. This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the Maginot Line's history. It did not fail because it was poorly built. It did not fail because its soldiers did not fight. It failed because it had been conceived for a world that no longer existed when it was finally tested. After the French defeat, many of the fortresses surrendered only when they received official orders. Some were never captured in direct combat. From a technical standpoint, the Maginot Line could claim success. From a strategic standpoint, it had been surpassed. In the post-war period, the Maginot Line became an ambiguous symbol. For some, it was the ultimate example of misguided planning. For others, an impressive engineering achievement unfairly criticized. But above all, it came to represent a warning, the embodiment of the danger of investing everything in a single vision of the future. Today, many of the bunkers still exist. Some have been turned into museums. Others are abandoned, swallowed by vegetation, silent witnesses to an era in which concrete seemed to offer definitive answers. To walk through their corridors is to walk through a mentality that believed security could be permanent, that war could be frozen in time. The story of the Maginot Line is not only about France or the Second World War, it is about human choices in the face of fear, about the temptation to seek absolute solutions to problems that are, by nature, constantly changing, about the difficulty of accepting that the future almost never respects even the most careful plans. Every generation builds its own Maginot Line. Sometimes it takes the form of a technology considered invincible. Other times, an economic, political, or military doctrine regarded as unquestionable. At the moment, it appears, it impresses. It shocks adversaries. It reassures allies. But if it does not evolve, it risks failing not with a bang, but with silence. And perhaps that is why this story remains so relevant, because it reminds us that the most dangerous decisions are not those made in desperation, but those made with excessive confidence. The Maginot Line did not fall. It was left behind. And while the world advanced at high speed, it remained immobile, waiting for a war that never came in the expected form. In the next episode of this series, we will explore another historical decision that seemed logical, inevitable, and even brilliant in its time, but would eventually reveal the same hidden fragilities. Because history does not repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes, and the most dangerous rhymes are the ones we ignore because they seem too solid to fail.